Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah Rauhanen. I'm the Ottawa Campus Manager and Program Advisor, and I'm so thrilled to be hosting this webinar with Linda this evening. Linda is going to be talking about melatonin, and many of us are aware that melatonin is most commonly used for insomnia and improving sleep in different conditions. So Linda is going to dive deeper and share more information on how melatonin affects our health in various ways. Linda is a Master of Science and has a Master's of Science in Cell Biology. She has a long teaching history, having taught a wide variety of science courses, including biology, chemistry, microbiology, laboratory techniques, and environmental science. Linda has been teaching with IHN since September 1996. In IHN's diploma program, she teaches biological chemistry, human anatomy and physiology, body metabolism, and advanced nutrition research. She also teaches the continuing education course, Applied Endocrinology. So now I'll let Linda share more about herself and then the upcoming endocrinology course.
And that's what this is about tonight, is endocrinology. I'm not sure what else is to share about me. You kind of gave my background. I've been at IHN forever. It seems like forever anyway, because it's been that's since 96. So that's 25 years almost. It seems like a lifetime. Certainly it's Matthew's lifetime. That's my son. The endocrinology course is a continuing education course that we offer usually once a year. And we're doing it in May, June this year. That's what we did last year as well. It's 7 Tuesday nights. And so we get to spend 7 nights talking about hormones. In the anatomy and physiology course that I teach, we do the endocrine chapter in a day. Well, we do it over 7 days. So we get a lot more information. And so some of you might be interested in joining in one of those, the endocrinology course at some point in time. At any rate, we're here tonight, and tonight it's all about melatonin. So I think we're just going to go right into the slideshow because there's a lot to tell you about melatonin. It's not just sleep. I know that's what everybody thinks about. It's not just sleep, but let's see. We go into slideshow mode. Just give it a moment. There we go. Oh, that looks so pretty. Melatonin. Melatonin, I'm sure you probably know this, is made by the pineal gland. It's located in the 3rd ventricle of the brain, and I'm going to have some diagrams for you coming up. It's small and cone shaped. It's actually pine cone shaped. And that's where the name comes from. The name comes from the Latin pinea, which means pine cone. And the dimensions are there, although that's a little bit hard to visualize. It's about the size of a pea. It has been referred to as the 3rd eye. And in fact, people have over the centuries, because we've actually known about the pineal gland since ancient Greece, they've ascribed it all kinds of mystical functions. Descartes called it the seat of the soul, although Descartes actually had his anatomy all mixed up, but that's okay. It is a vestigial remnant of what's called the 3rd eye. It's a photosensitive 3rd eye that's present in some fish, frogs, salamanders too. The pineal gland is controlled by light, the amount of light that's seen by the eyes every day. It does not receive direct light signals. It has to come indirectly through what's called, oh boy, that's fancy, it's the optic tract. Whoa, hold on, that's interesting. That went back. That's better. Just want to get into the annotations here. There we go. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, which is found in the come back here. I can't type tonight. Hypothalamus. There we go. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is in the hypothalamus. So that gives you an idea of where we are in the brain. They call it the SCN because it's too fancy a term to have to say all the time. Let's just go forward. So you can see here, let's see if I can circle it for you. Here's the pineal gland. And it's part of the epithalamus. We're just in this area here. the third ventricle of the brain is here. The ventricle is a fluid-filled space in the brain, and here it's surrounded by the thalamus, and then the pineal gland is part of the epithalamus, which just means near or beside the thalamus. And it's just that little section there. In fact, you can see it here. Let's see if you can see it. It's kind of looking small there, but you can see it much better up there. Oh, look, it does look like a pine cone. See, it is a pine cone shape. That's cool. Here we can see that suprachiasmatic nucleus. You see light, sunlight coming in, obviously not the moon. We need sunlight to come in. And then through the eye, we're going to stimulate, there's the SCN, we have the optic tract going to the pineal gland. And when we have light, we do not get melatonin. So we need to have dark for melatonin. Melatonin is made when it is dark. And it's made through this pathway. You can see that we start with tryptophan. And then we go to, this is 5-hydroxytryptophan, which is 5-HTP. And a lot of people take HTP as a supplement. And you can see that the next thing that gets produced is serotonin. So from HTP, we go to serotonin. And then through another step, there's 2 more steps before we get down here to melatonin. And so if you really care about the structure, that's what it looks like. Although we have all of these molecules in the pathway, the only thing that gets secreted in any amount by the pineal gland is melatonin. This is cool. This is where we can look at how melatonin secretion varies in a day. And you'll notice that we start off, I guess that'd be midnight. No, that's not midnight, that's 12 noon. I'm not paying attention here. That's 12 noon and it's low. You can see it's quite low here. And then as it starts to get darker, it goes up, 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 up. We see peak levels at midnight, and it comes back down and is low as we go into the daytime again. So I see a hand raised there. So Natalia, you have a question? No. Okay, did we have a question or we want to move forward? Okay. This is also very interesting because you can see here that we have the change in melatonin production through your lifetime. And so it changes quite a bit as we go through lifetime. One of the first things you'll notice, if you look at the babies, you look at the newborns. Newborns make minimal melatonin. And so there's very little melatonin made until 3 to 4 months of age. And so really we have to get to 3 to 4 months of age before we have any appreciable amount of melatonin being synthesized. That means that when that newborn baby wakes you up in the middle of the night, they really don't know that it's the middle of the night. They have no idea. Once they get to be a few months old, they've got a better idea. And actually, what's another interesting thing is that the melatonin is in breast milk, and that actually helps babies sleep a little bit. You will also notice that melatonin increases to be quite high in childhood. Children make a lot of melatonin. And you know that children sleep more than adults do. Then you can see it says puberty occurs as melatonin declines. And so that's another interesting thing about melatonin, is it seems to be involved in the timing of puberty. And I think we'll mention that a little bit. We're going to talk about fertility a little bit later on in the slides, but melatonin seems to inhibit the onset of puberty. And so we have to have it drop a little bit until puberty, so that puberty will begin. You'll see that it continues to decline as we get older and older and older. And so that by the time you get to be close to my age, they say that older adults make negligible amount of melatonin. And clearly that's going to vary from person to person. Some people are going to make more than others, but it does explain, at least in part, why many older people have difficulty sleeping. The best known role of melatonin has to do with that circadian rhythm. So we think about it as being a sleep trigger. Melatonin secretion increases in the dark. We knew that light inhibits melatonin. When we have it dark, we're going to get more melatonin. Melatonin can be used to treat what are called circadian rhythm disorders in the blind. So circadian rhythm is when your internal clock doesn't match up with what the outside world is. For people who are blind, of course, because they're not really registering that light, they don't get the melatonin secretion pattern that they should get. And they do have it's called entrainment. So they're not actually lined up with what's going on in the world around them. Melatonin seems to help with that. And that's that was kind of the first evidence we had that melatonin was involved in circadian rhythms. We know that melatonin is the sleep trigger in diurnal animals. In animals that are active during the day, melatonin is what tells us to sleep. But in nocturnal animals, melatonin actually increases activity. So the response actually depends on the organism. Humans, of course, are diurnal. Melatonin supplementation can help people fall asleep, and it can help people stay asleep. Now, it's not a guarantee because there are many, many factors that affect sleep. Melatonin is just one of them. And so I can't promise you that if you're not sleeping that you're going to take melatonin, you're going to have a fabulous night's sleep, but it might help. We also find that people who work at night have reversed melatonin secretion patterns. So shift work, and actually shift work is associated with an increased risk of a number of health conditions, including cancer. Some of that might have to do with the difference in the melatonin secretion. Similar changes occur in people who fly from one time zone to another. And we find that melatonin helps people cope with jet lag. So if you are going from one time zone to another, taking melatonin can help set you to the appropriate rhythm for that time zone that you're now in. So it does also help improve daytime sleep for shift workers. Interestingly, melatonin in animals is involved in things like the timing of migration and hibernation. So all kinds of activities, not just sleep, are associated with melatonin. Now here's an interesting one. We've all had our lives disrupted. This past year has been unlike any other year in most people's memory. And this may actually be affecting melatonin because we're not following the same schedule that we're used to following. We're been forced into lockdown where I am. It's a stay-at-home order. I'm not supposed to leave my house. So it disrupts the timing of and duration of exposure to ambient light. And we're getting a lot of screen use in the evening. People are using this cell phone. Actually, I'm going to drop down the size. That's too big for me. Go back down to 24. They're using their cell phones, and they're using their tablets, and they're using their TVs because they're binge watching on Netflix. And what else are we using? We're doing all kinds of things where we're the computer, of course. I'm staring into one. The computer. We're doing this more probably than we have, partly because we're connecting with people on social media, partly because we want to know what's going on in the news. And so we're having a lot of exposure, perhaps more than we're used to. And it's the blue light that's a problem. It's blue light that blocks melatonin production. So many people will use blue light blocking goggles in the evening in particular to try to stop that exposure. We also find, of course, that sleep's affected by our activities. Some of us have had a decrease in our activity levels. Well, lockdown, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything. And unfortunately, we've seen a lot of this over the last year. We have a lot more increase in mental health issues. Depression has certainly been a factor over the last year for many, many people. Stress. I can ask, what's long-term stress? The answer right now is pandemic. The pandemic absolutely is long-term stress. I was reading this and they said, work overload. I keep hearing that people have more time during the pandemic. I don't know who they are because I don't. I find everything takes more time to do, whether it's trying to work online, whether it is just kind of go get your groceries. Everything takes longer to do, and everything is a little bit stressful. And all of these things are affecting our sleep. I said that melatonin is involved in fertility. And I said that it might be involved in the timing of puberty. Melatonin suppresses gonadotropin secretion, and it does so by affecting GnRH, that's gonadotropin releasing hormone, that is made by the hypothalamus, and melatonin interferes with GnRH. So when we have high melatonin levels, we don't get the gonadotropin secretion, so we don't get the FSH, we don't get the LH. There we go. Melatonin, if we do experiments, if we give it to rats, I always feel sorry for those poor rats, but it delays sexual maturation in male rats. And so it does decrease, melatonin secretion decreases in children as puberty approaches. So it might affect the timing of puberty in humans. Now, does light pollution therefore cause early puberty? We're seeing earlier puberty. We're seeing girls getting their periods younger, for example. Is melatonin a factor? Because it is never dark out there. We have a lot of light pollution, and that is interfering with our sleep quality, but it also might be interfering, it might be causing the melatonin levels to drop enough that we get the gonadotropin hormone being released earlier. So that's a possibility. Now, thing is, there's other possible factors in early puberty. We have xenoestrogens. We've got molecules in the environment that mimic estrogen that might be a factor. And obesity might be a factor as well. Heavier girls tend to have higher estrogen levels and get their periods at an earlier age. So I don't know if it's just melatonin or if it is melatonin, but we think that it might be. The other interesting question is, if we give melatonin to children, does it affect when they go into puberty? And I looked into the research, and the research basically said probably not. But if you give them enough regularly, there is a concern that maybe it will. We also find that people who have pineal gland tumors, about 1% of brain tumors actually involve the pineal gland. And those people will have either increased or decreased melatonin levels, and they have either hyper or hypogonadal function. So we have a lot of evidence that melatonin actually affects fertility. In animals, it does. Melatonin times seasonal fertility in animals. So some animals are only fertile for a certain length of time. And there's two broad categories here. We have what are called long day breeders, and they become fertile when day length increases, which happens in spring. So horses and groundhogs. Okay, horses and groundhogs are long day breeders. Short day breeders become fertile when the day length decreases, which happens in the fall. And that is sheep and goats, for example. I've got a diagram for you here. Let's see if we can follow through on this. So this is showing the amount of light seen by the eye hitting the retina, going into the pineal gland. When we have long days, we have less melatonin, right? Down here, this is less than 13 or 14 hours of darker. So long days, we have less melatonin being produced. So the pineal gland normally makes melatonin, but with lots of light, we get less melatonin. Less melatonin, we're not going to inhibit the gonads. So long days tend to promote reproduction in most species. As a matter of fact, in chickens, they will use long days because they can artificially change the day length to promote egg laying in chickens. But there are some animals like those sheep and goats that actually are fertile in short days. And I know this says that the pineal gland breaks out of the inhibition, but I was just reading today, because I was checking it before I came in tonight, that for those with short day breeders, melatonin actually increases gonadotropin releasing hormones. So it's an opposite effect, which I thought really interesting. Bottom line is melatonin seems to affect when these animals can breed. Another role of melatonin that you might be familiar with is mood. It's seasonal affective disorder, and that is appropriately, the acronym is SAD. It may be associated with a misalignment of circadian rhythm, and some people definitely are more affected by this than others. So we can actually get clinical depression in some people. So the short days of winter can cause misalignment of circadian rhythm, leading to depression. And we treat it very, very often. We treat it with light therapy. And it's really cool because what we find that bright light for about 2 hours in the morning can improve mood in about 90% of the patients in as little as 2 to 4 days. Let me scroll that out a little bit so you can see it a bit better. Oh, but I can't type morning. We can fix that. We have the technology. Bright light for 2 hours in the morning can improve mood in 90% of the patients who have SAD in as little as 2 to 4 days. That is dramatic. Now, my husband, who's downstairs, so he can't hear me, does suffer from SAD. So a few years ago, I got him a light, and the difference in his mood is dramatic. And so I know for him, it makes a really big difference. And the literature says it makes a lot of difference for a lot of people. Interestingly, it's not necessarily that there's too much melatonin overall, it's that we just have the wrong pattern. And so sometimes we can actually treat with low doses of melatonin later on in the day, again, to help set that circadian rhythm, and that can be helpful too. But light therapy is more commonly used. One of the things I find fascinating about melatonin is that its first role was probably nothing to do with sleep, nothing to do with circadian rhythm. It's found, well, at the top you see it says it is ubiquitous. It is found all over the place. Animals, yeah, we said that. Plants, bacteria. As a matter of fact, it probably evolved in bacteria, where its role was as a free radical scavenger. And in plants, it acts as an antioxidant. So melatonin is a really important antioxidant, and that was probably its first role. In plants, melatonin also promotes seed germination and growth. It stimulates immunity. We're going to talk about immunity a little bit in people as well. And it modulates circadian rhythm and food ripening. So melatonin is actually involved in the photoperiod response. So we know that some plants will bloom, for example, in response to certain length of days. And for example, a Christmas cactus will bloom at Easter and Christmas, but only if it gets natural light, because it needs to have the correct length of days in order to bloom. And so many plants have photoperiod response, and melatonin seems to be involved in modulating that. As I said, it is an antioxidant. It is a very potent antioxidant. That role of melatonin was discovered back in 1993. It is one of the very few antioxidants that can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it increases glutathione levels. That's cool too. Melatonin is found inside our mitochondria. Almost every cell in your body actually has melatonin on the inside. We think it might be made there, but it's actually relatively high concentration on the inside. And we think here it's acting to deal with free radicals. When we perform aerobic respiration, most of which happens inside the mitochondria, free radicals are formed. Melatonin may well be there to help deal with those. And we think melatonin can help treat all kinds of different types of disease. It may decrease the risk or treat, what have we got here? Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Actually, I think I've got a slide for you for Alzheimer's coming up because it's interesting there. Cancer, depression. I kind of had to start listing them across because there's so many of them. Schizophrenia, bipolar disease, fibromyalgia, diabetes, and more. So we find that people with diabetes, metabolic syndrome, cardiovascular disease have lower levels of melatonin than healthy people do. And so it may well be that melatonin is playing a role in these conditions or lack thereof. We also find that autistic people may well have lower melatonin levels. Here we see, this is for Alzheimer's, and we know that melatonin inhibits beta amyloid plaque formation. So melatonin actually interferes with beta amyloid plaque formation. We know that Alzheimer's patients definitely have lower levels of melatonin. And so you can see it's suggesting here that if we have melatonin suppressed, we get more oxidative stress, we get tau, that's another one of the proteins pathology, you get circadian dysfunction, you get amyloid plaque, which leads to Alzheimer's. Bottom line is melatonin actually decreases this formation. I think that maybe melatonin could cure a rainy day. Would you make more melatonin on a rainy day? You just might. Melatonin has got wide-ranging effects on immunity too. Okay, yeah, I'll talk about that later. It has general immunoenhancing effect in humans and animals. Your lymphocytes make it. It's been all over the place, isn't it? It affects multiple aspects of immunity. So it stimulates innate immunity. It's called non-specific. That means that the cells don't have to learn, they just know. So we have what are called NK cells. These are natural killer cells. By the way, just so you know, NK cells attack cancer cells and virus infected cells. and melatonin helps them. Also will stimulate neutrophils and macrophages. It also elevates what we call specific immunity. And so we're looking with specific immunity, we're looking at the B lymphocytes. Those are the ones that are involved in the antibody response. And then you can see the helper T cells. That would be the T lymphocytes. So these are your two main arms of immunity, and both of which seem to be stimulated by melatonin. But it's not all necessarily good news, because melatonin may increase the risk of some autoimmune conditions. And so that doesn't necessarily mean that more melatonin is better. I can't tell you for sure that it's always going to be helpful, but you can see a lot of the time these are effects that we really, really want to have, but we want to be careful because you certainly don't want to trigger autoimmunity. This is a cool diagram. Now, I was doing some research before we came to do the seminar, and I wanted to look at the connection of melatonin and the pandemic. And I knew that our schedules had all been disrupted, and I knew that melatonin has broad range effects on your health from that standpoint. But what I came across was articles looking at melatonin being used to treat COVID-19, melatonin being used to prevent COVID-19, and melatonin being used to improve the effectiveness of vaccines. And they really talk, the article, and this is in a peer-reviewed journal, was talking about melatonin as being possibly a silver bullet when it comes to treating COVID-19. You can look and you see melatonin there in the middle, very pretty melatonin in the middle. And you can see there's the COVID-19 virus, and melatonin may actually interfere with its ability to get into the cells. It blocks the receptor that it binds to get into the cells. Melatonin has a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, and you see we can help decrease some of the inflammation that be involved. It upregulates the immune system. So you see neutrophils and lymphocytes, and these are T cells and CD4 cells and so on. It decreases the oxidative stress. ROS is reactive oxygen species. RNS is reactive nitrogen species. Decreasing pro-oxidant enzymes, increasing antioxidant enzymes, obviously improving chronodisruption. That not only do we get improved sleep quality, it decreases delirium and pain. It might help prevent multi-organ failure. It helps decrease risk of, these are what we call comorbidities. They happen sometimes at an increased rate after COVID-19 infections, things like diabetes and metabolic syndrome. You know as well that COVID-19 is associated with a lot of neurological symptoms. There's been a lot of talk about COVID-19 increasing your risk of stroke, because they've been trying to tell us that since COVID-19 gives you a higher risk of stroke than the vaccine does, that we should all go out and get that vaccine. I'm not going to talk about vaccines tonight, but melatonin decreases that risk. It also decreases things like demyelination, convulsions, cognitive decay, brain fog, and again, you see here, possibly improving the response to the vaccines. So all of that, this one little molecule, I thought was really quite remarkable. But wait, there's more. Melatonin might make you live longer. Aging might be associated with free radical damage. Since melatonin is an antioxidant, it may slow the aging process. They've done work in mice, and mice given melatonin live longer than mice normally live. And I know that there are some humans who are trying this experiment out on themselves. There was a book a number of years ago called The Melatonin Miracle, and the authors of the book were doing just that. But, you know, it takes decades to get results with humans with that kind of thing. We know that calorie restriction by about 40% actually increases lifespan 30 to 50% in mice, rats, dogs, and monkeys. So if you decrease how much you take in, you actually live longer. But what's interesting is that this calorie restriction also increases secretion of melatonin by the gastrointestinal tract. Oh, wait, the gastrointestinal tract makes melatonin? I did say it's everywhere. So melatonin supplementation might make you live longer. A lot of that work's been done on mice because they have short lifespans, so it's easy to see the results fairly quickly. But it's interesting to note as well that melatonin is now being used topically to prevent aging of the skin. So it may well have effects in humans as well. So many things happen as we get older. Calcification of the pineal gland. The pineal gland calcifies as we get older. It's not just a human occurrence. This happens in animals as well. And that probably interferes with melatonin production. May well explain why, again, we have lower melatonin as we get older, and older people often have troubles with sleep. Fluoride, that's got to be bad. Fluoride increases calcification. The pineal gland actually seems to concentrate fluoride. So fluoride in your water may actually be affecting the health of the pineal gland. So let's run out and get ourselves some melatonin, shall we? It sounds really exciting. It seems like it can do all these wonderful things for us. I like natural melatonin secretion, and I like to try to have my environment so that I don't have a lot of that blue light. You should be using those blue blocking apps on your screen so you don't get a lot of light during the evening, particularly the blue light. You should try to have a dark place to sleep. If there are night lights about, they should be red, they shouldn't be blue. But melatonin supplementation is incredibly common, and it seems to be pretty safe. People very, very commonly use it to facilitate sleep. I actually don't have trouble sleeping, but my husband will use it sometimes. You can go into Shoppers Drug Mart and take it off the shelf. A physiological level can be attained by taking about 0.5 milligram. It doesn't seem, unlike sleeping pills, the melatonin supplementation does not seem to alter the natural sleep pattern. If you go above 0.5 milligram, it's not a physiological level. It's not a level that your body would normally make. It's what we call pharmacological. But when we buy melatonin, it's like 3 milligrams, 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams. So we typically are taking a lot more than what your body would naturally make. There it is. I think that's a Weber Naturals one. I'm not promoting any brand. It just happened to be an image that I got to put on my slideshow. Melatonin seems to be relatively safe to take. There are up to 2 grams taken with no serious side effects. We will talk about side effects in a minute. Oral melatonin typically absorbed within about 30 minutes, although they often say take it 60 minutes before bedtime. Its half-life is about 45 minutes. So you get a spike quite a bit higher than what would be physiological, but then it drops down quite rapidly. And so this is going to be cleared. Well, you see 30 milligram tablet, which is higher than most of you would take, gives you a spike that's 50 times physiological, but cleared in 6 to 10 hours. Now you want it cleared before you wake up. So you don't, 30 milligrams is a little bit high to take. 1 to 3 milligrams gives you blood levels that are up to 20 times normal. But again, that's going to drop down quite quite a bit through the night. What should children take? Now there's a question. Dosage for children. The best one I have for you is in milligrams per kilogram. I like dosages for children in milligrams per kilogram because that is really going to be tailored to their body weight. You will see that different recommendations are made for kids. So I will see a recommendation sometimes of, 2.5 to 3 milligrams for children, but 5 to 10 milligrams for teenagers. I'd rather stay with the milligrams per kilogram recommendation. So it's 0.05 milligrams per kilogram is the best choice for children. People commonly think that taking melatonin stops you from making melatonin. And the answer is no, it does not. It does not cause habituation. What controls how much light, so how much melatonin you make, is how much light hits your eyes. And so it's not going to affect natural melatonin secretion. Oh, I know what I was going to tell you. Maybe I want to tell you here. You can get melatonin supplementation in a couple of forms. You can get what we call natural melatonin, and this is from animals, more often cows than anything else. So that's the natural melatonin. And then you can get synthetic melatonin. This is made in a lab with enzymes. Now, I know that there's a temptation to think that natural is better, but there might be concerns with the natural melatonin because when you isolate it from the brain of an animal, you have the risk of it being contaminated with other things. So, for example, when we talk about mad cow disease, Creutzfeldt-Jakob is the human version. So those are prions, or maybe contaminated with bacteria or viruses. So this is one of the reasons why you might want a synthetic version as opposed to the natural version, because the synthetic version is not going to have the risks of having something else there in terms of it's really the prions that scare me. It's the Creutzfeldt-Jakob that worries me. Side effects. The biggest side effect, well, let's see, some people have headache, some people have dizziness, some people have nausea, some people have drowsiness. One of the most common side effects is vivid dreams. Some people like them, some people don't. My son took melatonin one time to help him sleep because he does have issues with insomnia, but he had such vivid dreams, he found them really unpleasant. He said he will never take it again because he found it really, really unpleasant. And the other one I'm going to add here is in children, sometimes it can also, one of the side effects can be bedwetting. In addition to that, need to be careful in that melatonin may interact with some medications. So blood pressure medications, diabetes medications might interact with melatonin. So you need to check before, if you're taking those medications, to make sure that melatonin is okay. It is in a lot of cases. My husband's got type 2 diabetes and he's taking melatonin and he's just fine. And he's taking melatonin in part because not only because it might help him sleep, but because he's worried about nerve damage. And so he thinks he's doing the melatonin to help try to improve nerve function. Melatonin's in foods. It's all over the place. In fruits and vegetables. So there's some melatonin in cherries and corn, asparagus, tomatoes, pomegranate, olives, grapes, broccoli, and cucumber. Some melatonin in grains like rice, barley, and rolled oats. Nuts and seeds like pistachio, walnut, peanuts, sunflower seeds, mustard seed, flaxseed, and beverages. And this is one you might know. Beer and red wine, quite notably, have melatonin in them. That's why both of those might make you feel a little sleepy. Coffee, well, yeah, there's melatonin, but there's caffeine in there too, so you're much less likely to be sleepy with the coffee. And I think that is the end of my slideshow.
Oh, thank you so much, Linda. That was such an informative lecture. We're so fortunate to have you. I just wanted to share a comment that one of your students wrote on Instagram when we were promoting this webinar. She wrote, if from Maria, Linda's the most wonderful and inspiring teacher. She wants students to succeed and absolutely loves her material. She made me fall in love with chemistry at 41.
And that's good to hear. I like to hear that. So I think I saw, and I just happened to see something in the chat about whether or not it was safe during pregnancy. And I had this question when I did the course, when I did this last year, and I went away and researched the one on pregnancy. And melatonin is considered to be safe for short-term use during pregnancy, but I'd be careful because it does cross the placenta. And because it crosses the placenta, it might affect the baby. Some animal studies showed that melatonin might have a negative effect on the birth weight of the baby. And so you want to be careful, and you might want to use it short term, but you wouldn't want to use it regularly during pregnancy. So that's I just happened to see that as the chat was scrolling by. And since I had the answer right there, I thought I'd share it.
Yeah, that's great. And so I'll pull up the other questions. So
Absolutely.
if the attendees don't mind, if you have more questions, to put them in the Q&A section versus the chat, that way they're all in one spot. But I'll just go through the chat right now.
And I'm going to write down in case you get questions I don't know the answer to. What I will do is I will look them up, and I will make sure that I share them.
Okay. So do you suggest any brands for blue light blocking glasses for those on computers all day?
I don't recommend brands. That's simple. I don't, and I don't actually use them. One of the things you can do rather than wearing the goggles is you can actually get your computer to do a filter itself. I know that that's easy as well, and that's it depends on your individual choice. But I haven't actually used them, so I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't like recommending brands. I don't like to support particular companies because I don't have any stake in anything.
Dina asks, I take 5 milligrams of Jameson melatonin every night. Should I try lowering the dose?
Not if you feel okay. The only reason that you want to lower the dose, because that's absolutely safe. If you don't get stomach upset, you're not feeling groggy when you wake up, there's nothing wrong with that amount.
Okay. Carmela asks, how do we check our melatonin levels?
I'm sure that it could be done with a blood test, but I don't know how commonly that's done. I don't think it's a standard test. And the other thing is melatonin does vary up and down throughout the day. And so the melatonin level you'd have to do some kind of assay to do it. I don't know if melatonin is one of the ones that can be tested through saliva. I know that we do that with cortisol. We just because you'll do a little spit test for cortisol, and they'll have you do like a whole bunch in little tubes throughout the day because it varies throughout the day. I don't know that melatonin's done that way, but you'd have to either do that. You need to have it analyzed by the lab to find out how much the melatonin is. There's no way for you to just guess through like symptoms whether or not you have high or low melatonin.
Okay. Is it true that melatonin will not produce unless the room we sleep in is completely 100% dark?
I don't know that it's an on-off switch. Like I wouldn't say my thought is that it's not going to be no melatonin if it's not 100% dark. It's just going to be less melatonin. And so it's a sliding scale. And so 100% dark is best, but as dark as you can get is better than having it lighter, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah. And then are there any brands of melatonin? I mean, I know you had just mentioned the brand comment.
Yeah. There's many reputable brands out there. I don't have I don't want to recommend one over another. I think what you want to look at is dosage. And then go with a brand because there's a lot of brands that make melatonin that you would already have allegiance to for other things that you buy. So go with a brand that you trust.
Okay, so I'll open the Q&A. So yeah. Paula asked, red light or NIR light?
Okay, you're gonna have to help me. NIR is what?
then I think is it near infrared light?
Oh, that could be
Yeah, near infrared light therapy.
to increase melatonin, I think. I know that there are benefits of that near infrared light. The thing is that when we talk about red light, it's because we want to be able to see. When we use red, like if you have a night light, near infrared might be good in terms of improving melatonin, but it's not going to let me find my way to the bathroom without falling over. And so that's why we say red.
Okay. Paula asks, what's the best dosage for melatonin?
I don't know. Because we have such wide dosages. You'll see, as I said, people take 2, 3 grams, 10 grams, 20 grams. They all seem to be relatively safe if you're not getting side effects. You're probably looking at 5 grams, 3 to 4 grams is a good one to go with there. What you want to make sure is that when you wake up, it's out of your system. So if you feel groggy when you wake up, you've taken too much. And I think you want to judge by your body that way. If you feel nauseous, you want to cut down on your dosage as well.
Okay, perfect. Someone asked, I thought supplementing with melatonin could decrease your body's own production, so it wasn't ideal. Oh yes, you covered that in the lecture.
Everything I've read says that's not so. I have people flat out say, oh, it's going to stop your body from making melatonin. Everything I read says no. You're going to keep making melatonin. It's the light that affects it, not your melatonin level.
Okay. Some people say that it keeps them up at night. Any idea why?
Melatonin? And it's certainly possible. I'm trying to think why. I can see if I can find a good answer for that. I mean, I know, like, my first thought is, well, there are animals where melatonin makes them more active. So I know in some animals that's the case, but humans aren't meant to be that way. As to why it's working that way with some people, I'm going to have to see if I can find an answer, because I don't know a good answer for that. I mean, some people it doesn't work. Some people reverse. Oh, okay. I'm reading this, and some people reverse melatonin to serotonin, which would be more stimulating. Now that's interesting. Okay, I'm going to see if I can find out, because I'm curious now. That's my problem. I always want to find out things. I always find that people ask me questions I've never been asked before. And that's one thing that I love about this is when people ask me a question I don't know the answer to, because I haven't been asked that question before, I get to go away and find out, and it's lots of fun. Form a detox on the brain. Well, certainly melatonin is an antioxidant, and so it does do that. Your suggestion there is that might be stimulating. I'm not sure.
Okay, so Colette asks, what is the best time to take melatonin?
30 minutes to an hour before you go to bed.
Okay. Melanie asks, are there specific metabolic pathways that would impact melatonin clearance?
And I'm trying to remember looking at what the clearance is. It's so high, and I know that it's cleared like within the half-life is relatively quick, and I'm thinking that a lot of your tissues actually do take it up and utilize it, whether it is just the tissues or whether there is the liver involvement as well. And I wouldn't be surprised to see the liver involvement, but I'd have to look to see what the pathway is for that for sure. I think a lot of it just gets bound by the tissues and is broken down in the tissues.
Okay. Paula asks, I take 5-HTP every day at 6 p.m. Should I still take melatonin for all the benefits?
5-HTP can be turned into melatonin. So the 5-HTP, and you saw it in the diagram that we had that showed the pathway, we see that there's a few steps, but 5-HTP goes to serotonin, and then from serotonin you go to melatonin. To be sure that you have melatonin, you can take melatonin, because the 5-HTP isn't, although it can be turned into melatonin, it won't necessarily be turned into melatonin in the amounts that you would be perhaps therapeutic.
Okay. Dina asks, how early should a person start the light therapy in the morning, and how soon before bed should a person stop electronics?
How soon in the morning? It's after you get up. You know, when it's light outside, it's good to be exposed to the light inside. So I don't know if there's necessarily a particular time. If the sun's up in the sky, it's a good time for you to be doing that. Whether it's 8 o'clock in the morning, 9 o'clock in the morning, but you want it early in the morning, as opposed, you don't want it late morning, you want it earlier morning. Once you stop using electronics, well, again, hours before bed. So it's not like in the last half hour before bed, you're looking for a few hours before bed for sure, that you would like to decrease your exposure to the blue light. That doesn't necessarily mean stopping the electronics. It means trying to block the blue light from them.
Okay. Oh, Sophia wanted to write that the best blue light glasses are Prospect. You can get them on Amazon for about $70. If anyone's interested.
Sounds good.
Paula also asked, I also take lavender. Will it be too much to take the melatonin in combination with melatonin and 5-HTP?
I don't think there's any interaction with the lavender and the melatonin 5-HTP. Again, you can take such high doses of melatonin without serious side effects that I don't think it's dangerous. I mean, we said you could take up to 2 grams. Remember, that would be 2,000 milligrams. 2,000 milligrams can be taken without serious side effects. I would never recommend going that high, but what it means is it's a pretty safe supplement to take.
Okay. Damien asks, how does it cause vivid dreams? By what mechanism?
I don't know if we know. We know that it does. I don't know if we know how it does. The brain's a mystery to us in many ways. Although we know a lot about how the brain works, we still have a lot left to learn. So I would say that I don't know, but I have a feeling that we don't know. So it's not just me. I think that scientists don't necessarily know. We just know that it does.
Okay. Maria asks, is it better to sleep in total darkness instead of sleeping in front of the TV with a movie going on to make myself fall asleep? I find sleeping in total darkness makes me sleep throughout the night.
Well, sleeping in total darkness is absolutely better. Slate decided to come say hi. He stayed away for the whole thing. There, everybody, this is Slate.
That is so funny. My cat will not stop playing with every toy right now. And it's just, of course, out of all the times, he needs to find those balls hiding under the couch.
Yep. He's a very cute cat and he likes lots of attention.
Mine just won't stop. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. He just like, he didn't want a seminar to go by without having his face shown. Yeah, some of you guys have gotten to know Slate. There you go. Yeah, don't bite me, honey. He doesn't like me posing him.
Okay, we'll continue here. Melanie asked, do you find any benefit to prolonged release melatonin?
I think that a prolonged or release melatonin is probably give you a more natural exposure, because normally what we take, you get a spike and then it comes back down. So it's not physiological. It goes up quite a bit higher than natural. So a prolonged release is going to give you a more natural level of melatonin throughout the night. But again, you have to make sure it's cleared out of your system before you wake up, or you're going to feel groggy.
Okay, perfect. Is it okay to use for those who have mental health issues?
I want to say yes, because it can be really, really helpful. But I also have read some studies that say sometimes melatonin can make depression worse. And so I think that you need to be careful, but it might be very helpful, but you need to monitor to be sure that it's actually not having a negative effect.
Okay. Liliana says, I was curious about what kind of light exactly you bought for your husband that helped him with SAD. Is there a certain type of light?
They're marketed for specifically for this, for SAD. There's a number of different ones on the market. I actually don't remember the brand because he chose it and he uses it. It's great for him. I can't go near it. It's far too bright for me. I get migraine headaches from bright light, so I don't even look at it. So but he bought one of the less expensive ones on the market, and it still works wonderfully for him. The thing is that you have to have, they're meant to be for SAD, to give you the blue light, and you will look at some of the features for them. For some of them, you can have different intensities, and they've got timers and so on. So if you have a lower intensity, you have to have a longer exposure to it. I see in the chat there's somebody asking, they say they don't think that you're seeing their question. How would you know if you needed 5-HTP, serotonin, or melatonin? Serotonin is often associated with mood. And so people often want to increase serotonin to feel happier. That's often what we think of melatonin, with serotonin. Melatonin, most people are looking to take melatonin because they're looking to improve their quality of sleep. If they're not sleeping well, they may want to take melatonin. But I've seen people take melatonin because we're looking for some of those other benefits, whether it's because you might think you want to live longer, whether like my husband, you've got diabetes and you're trying to reduce some of the side effects. It's usually, I think, 2 to 5 milligrams a day that's looking for people who are looking for some of those health benefits, like decreasing risk or severity of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and so on. It's about 2 to 5 milligrams a day is what's typically used there. So the answer is there's no red flag that says, yes, you absolutely have to have it, but there are a lot of reasons that you might want to take it.
Okay. This is a really hot topic. We're getting a lot of questions.
And I hope I give you some answers here. We're trying.
Okay. Maria says, people with bipolar, what is the most milligrams that should be taken of melatonin?
I don't know if I've got a specific recommendation for that. And that's something you might actually want to talk over with your health professional in terms of making, because that's something you want to monitor carefully. Again, with these things, you're looking usually at the not high doses, so 2 to 5 to maybe 10 milligrams. But again, that's something somebody with bipolar would like to do. That's probably along with, in concert with the health professional, just to make sure that you're not having negative effects.
Okay. Would there be any reason to supplement if you're sleeping okay?
Well, it depends. If you think that you might have risk factors for some of these other health conditions, like Alzheimer's, like diabetes, and so on, it might decrease your risk. And as I was just saying, it also might be involved in decreasing risk of infection with COVID-19. So there might be some benefits there. People normally reach for it because they want to sleep, but there are other reasons that people can take it.
Okay. Annette asks, how would you know if you needed 5-HTP, serotonin, or melatonin?
And I think I saw that. And that's what I was talking about before. You don't necessarily. If you're not sleeping, then yes, you're thinking about the melatonin. Serotonin, we normally think about with mood, and people take 5-HTP in part because it's a precursor, and your body can choose when to take it. So a lot of people try it, and basically if they feel better, they keep taking it. If it doesn't make a difference, they may not stick with it.
Okay. Does the time you sleep matter?
It can. And I think you mean the time of day?
I think that's what Michelle means, yeah.
Yeah. I think that it does matter. I think that certainly it matters in terms of how much melatonin you're making before you go to sleep. So that if you try to go to sleep when it's bright outside, you're gonna have trouble sleeping. This is why people on day shift have trouble going to sleep. But we may also find that if you're sleeping later, so going to sleep at like 3 o'clock in the morning, again in the morning, it's getting bright again. So that might affect the melatonin. So keeping a more regular schedule is going to be better for melatonin secretion and probably get better quality sleep.
Okay. Dina asks, is there any way to decalcify the pineal gland?
I'm sure that there might be approaches to do this, but I'm not sure if I've got a good answer for that. I think the most important thing would be to try to eliminate the fluoride. That fluoride is one of the biggest culprits when it comes to calcification. So what you want to do first is stop the calcification if you can, and fluoride would be an aspect. I don't know if the chelators will work for this because again, we're talking about blood-brain barrier here. I'm not sure because I know people will take supplements that are like EDTA and so on to chelate and remove some of these. I'm not sure if they will work, but certainly I would look at the fluoride first.
Okay. Kiko asks, someone who cannot stay asleep after taking tryptophan containing food, what do you think the issue of this person is? No problem with falling asleep, but wakes up 3 to 4 hours later.
Well, the thing is, melatonin is only a piece of the puzzle. I remember attending a seminar many, many years ago that was just about sleep and all the different things with sleep, because sometimes people have trouble sleeping for all kinds of reasons. It might be actually that they're in pain. And so oftentimes people wake up and they can't stay asleep because they're actually in pain. And that really has a big effect on it. Sometimes it's because you're thirsty and you need to wake up. So there's so many different reasons. Melatonin is only one of them. And so we need to try to look at what some of those other factors are. And those are a couple of the ones is thirst, pain, but it's probably not melatonin. If you're falling asleep without trouble, melatonin may well not be the answer for you. And I see Romana's listening there that she has a list of herbs to decalcify the pineal gland. That sounds very interesting. Yeah, I'm not a neurologist, so that would be interesting.
Okay, Angela asks, should someone with a pre-existing autoimmune condition avoid supplementing with melatonin? Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. He's nuts.
I think maybe the answer there is yes, because melatonin can aggravate autoimmune conditions. And so that's something that you want to be careful with. I think instead you would want to look at doing it naturally. So you want to enhance your natural melatonin levels, but you wouldn't necessarily want to take exogenous or extra melatonin.
Okay. Trisha asks, is sun gazing at dawn or dusk good for the pineal gland?
I don't know that you need to look straight at the sun. Looking straight at the sun can be dangerous for your eyes, but being out in ambient light is good for the pineal gland at all times. So that's
okay. Can long-term use of melatonin cause bone loss in women? I came across this somewhere online a while ago.
Bone loss in women. I haven't come across that one. I'd have to look at a mechanism for that because I haven't come across that one, so I can't answer that one. I can probably look for research on it, and I will let Hannah. So some of the questions that if I don't have an immediate answer, what I'm going to do over the next few days and have time, I'm going to look at some of the research, and I'll let Hannah know what my answers are, and then perhaps you can share some of those.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. I heard Liliana asked, I heard GABA was good for sleep. If it is, then would it be okay to take both GABA and melatonin, or perhaps would it be better to take just melatonin?
I've seen them used together because they work differently. So they are sometimes used together.
Okay.
And in fact, they use magnesium and melatonin is a very common combination.
When should we take melatonin to treat the other conditions besides improving sleep?
You still want to take it before bedtime. Yeah, you still want to take it at the same time of day because otherwise you're going to affect your circadian rhythm.
Okay. Terry asks, I've been using a supplement for sleep containing magnesium, GABA, and melatonin, but it keeps me awake. Any thoughts on this blend or why this might happen?
And that kind of goes back to the question we had before about melatonin possibly being stimulating for some people. And at that point, I said I wasn't sure why. My thought there is you're taking the blend, try melatonin on its own and see if it has the same effect. So what you want to do is isolate it and see which one of those components it is that's having that effect on you. And so if melatonin alone does it, then you know it's the melatonin. And then for you personally, maybe you just want to look at magnesium and GABA. On the other hand, maybe the melatonin on its own doesn't have that effect.
Okay. Could 5-HTP not convert for some reason? What would that be?
Well, your body chooses, I mean, this is a chemical reaction. It's going to be catalyzed by an enzyme, and I'd have to look at, I don't remember what the cofactors are for that one, depending on what, because usually vitamins and minerals are cofactors, so needed for some of these enzymes to work. If you have lower levels of some of these, you might have a slower conversion, and your body will make different amounts of these enzymes. So it depends on when it chooses to convert it to the product. And well, serotonin's used sometimes, and we don't convert it all the way to melatonin. So sometimes you stop at serotonin.
Okay. Does wearing a blindfold at night help with melatonin absorption?
From a supplement? No. Does it help with melatonin production naturally? Probably.
Okay. Could melatonin help with endometriosis treatment?
It might, because it has, in endometriosis, one of the things that happens is you have a lot of inflammation and you have some overactive immunity in some cases. I've seen this study where they said that in endometriosis, some of the macrophages would go into fallopian tubes and eat the sperm of horrible things. Not the sperm, but the macrophages would go and eat them. Because melatonin can be anti-inflammatory, I think it may be beneficial.
Okay. Trisha asks, what is the effect of long-term supplementation of melatonin? Is it safe to do so?
A lot of people think that it is. So the research that I've seen suggests that it probably is safe.
Okay. Can you elaborate on how low calorie intake can increase melatonin production and life expectancy / lifespan? How are these two connected?
I'm not sure if we really know the mechanism. We're at the point of proving that it does do that, as opposed to proving how it does do that. But we've seen that, and this is something that's relatively well known, that if we do have calorie restriction, we have an extension in lifespan in animals, and it may well work that way in people too. Probably changes the way that your body is managing its resources, for example. And but the interesting thing for me in that was it's showing that there's an increase in melatonin production when we have the calorie restriction. And so melatonin, what we thought was kind of an overall effect on metabolism, we might find that melatonin is actually kind of underlying some of that. But I don't know that if we have an answer to how. Certainly for long life, because we think a lot of the aging is due to damage with free radicals. And because melatonin helps to neutralize those free radicals, that would be one explanation as to how melatonin could extend lifespan.
Okay. For those nervous to get the COVID vaccine, would you recommend they take melatonin to reduce chances of possible side effects?
I don't think that the melatonin is going to necessarily reduce the side effects. The- I'm not saying that it won't necessarily, but the research was showing that it might actually make them work better, be more effective as opposed to being safer. Those are two very different things. Um, the big concern that people have right now is that the AstraZeneca vaccine has been linked with really kind of scary blood clots. Now, the risk I think is about 1 in a million, but it's still a pretty scary side effect. I know that melatonin can decrease risk of blood clots, but I don't know if it decreases. This is a very specific type of blood clotting that we're getting with the AstraZeneca vaccine. I'm not sure that melatonin is affecting that type of blood clots. It's kind of a rare one. So I don't know that it's going to have a big effect, but it might make the vaccine work more effectively. So it's not a bad thing to do. I don't think there's any harm in doing it, and it might be beneficial.
Okay. And then there's three more questions in the
Okay.
chat. So, can long-term melatonin use cause bone loss in women down the road?
And we had that question, and I said that one I haven't come across before. I'm going to look into that and see if I can get you an answer.
Okay. Um, Evan asks, do you know if there have been any studies linking people that work third shift to having more disease? And if so, do you think it would be linked to low melatonin production over a long period of time?
And the answer is, when you say third shift, I'm not sure if you mean like the overnight shift, so people who do night work. And the answer is yeah. There's lots of studies out there that show that people who work shift work have higher rates of cardiovascular disease, have higher rates of cancer. Nurses in particular have been studied a lot because the nurses do a lot of those night shifts. And we do think in part that it is related to melatonin. So yeah, there's a lot of evidence out there that the night shifts have negative health effects.
Okay. And then the last question, is melatonin safe for someone that has Hashimoto's slash hypothyroid?
I'm hesitating on that one because again, Hashimoto's is autoimmune. And we know that melatonin might increase autoimmunity. And so I'd have to research whether it's specifically safe for that one. I'd be careful with it for that.
I think that's it for all of the questions. Well, thank you so much, Linda.
You're very welcome.